this is Cypress. This is at least a test runner for Cypress. And what you'll see here is as you're writing tests, it'll basically update them just in the runner here. And Cypress makes it really easy to not only access and run tests, but also to write them, like kind of like as you're writing through the test, just like run the testing here, and then once it hits a stopping point, it actually gives you a lot of good tools to continue writing that test. So I can give a quick example here, like just going back to the login test. And I'll actually stop it after this first one. Yeah, so if I stop it here, when it opens this like actual like text execution page, you'll see a few like buttons on the top here, the top tab. This, I'm trying to see. If there are any other tests, basically, like if it's running a whole suite of tests, this will give you access to viewing all of them. But we're just running this one test, so it doesn't do anything right now. You can see where it shows like the pass or fail tests. That'll update, and then the time execution for how long it takes. Oh yeah, like this one, since I paused it, it basically ran out of time to find what the response is looking for, so it failed. Auto scrolling, what you'll see is that as it runs through the test, it'll like open up these tabs and show like the different like responses it's getting, and it automatically scrolls through this like this bar here through the different tests. So if you just want to focus on a specific part while it's running through the other like tests, like I say tests, but you can pause that here. Just re-execute all the tests. This is kind of like the big thing I want to focus on, this selector playground. So it's like you're running through a test, it's not finished, but it hits a stopping point. You're trying to figure out like what could you use to like continue writing the test. This will give you access to highlighting like different elements on a page. And you can actually hit it here and it'll fill in this bar, like the cy.get command. And if it highlights, that means that Cypress actually sees like the actual element that you're trying to like indicate with this cy.get command. So this is super helpful. I use this all the time. There's also a cy.contains command. This one, I mean, it's less, what's the word I would say, precise maybe. So it actually looks for just like text elements on the page and indicates whether it can find those or not. Yeah, there we go. So cy.contains is sometimes useful. I use it every now and then, but I think cy.get is just way more precise in terms of what you can actually use for it to identify. So it's kind of like a balancing act in terms of like which one you want to use, but most of the time I just use cy.get. And then I think these just copy to clipboard, just copies. I believe it copies include the cy.get. I think it does. Yeah. So just an easy way if you find like the element that you're looking for and Cypress indicates that it sees it, you can just copy it and paste it. That just. Oh yeah, that just prints the elements of the console. So if you want to see like the full element, you can see it here instead of having to like search for it. I don't use this too often because another thing you can do too, if you inspect the page, and then I'll just hit that. Yeah, so you can find it the same sort of way just using Chrome itself. But there are lots of tools to figure out like what elements you're looking for when you want to execute a test. And I think like Cypress itself, just that tool itself and the playground selector is huge in terms of being able to write tests really quickly. There are a few settings, I guess, within the Cypress runner itself. There is this configuration tab where you can see like how Cypress is set by default and any sort of settings that are changed. There is a file, I think it's Cypress, yeah, cypress.json, where you can change any of these settings. So, for example, let me just set this back up. I forget what the base URL is by default, but you can actually change that, and I just have it set to my local host since that's where I have Informer running. And the reason you might want to change this is because there's a command, actually I can show it in this login test, cy.visit, and then just like a backslash. With this command, with just a backslash, it will always default to what your base URL is. So it's just convenient being able to like set my base URL in one place for localhost, and then every time I just have to use cy.visit, then it will always go to the same place. It's also nice too because with the slash you can do like, let's say if I want to go to the datasets page, so I can just type in datasets here, and then it will do like localhost slash and then datasets. So that's pretty convenient, just another shortcut basically. Let's see what else I have. Default command timeout. So this is how long it takes. I guess like I could explain it as, let's say Cypress is trying to execute a specific command within the test. Like let's say it's trying to do this, it's looking for this toast. So it's cy.get, and then it's looking for a toast response. I have it set so it'll wait 30 seconds for this element to appear before it will actually fail the test. And the reason I do that is because there are certain situations where, like, if we are refreshing a data set, or usually refreshing a data set would probably take around like 5 to 10 seconds. But sometimes, like, if a data set's like large, like kind of large, it can take even longer than that. So I wouldn't expect it to take longer than 30 seconds. So that's just about like kind of like the default I have it set for. Just give it a 30 seconds, and then if it doesn't find an element, then it'll fail the test. You can also set that timeout within a command itself. I think I have an example of that. Let me see. Yeah, so you see here I have this command like cy.get. It looks for like a button that has done in it. And then I have the timeout for that set for 3 minutes, I think that is. Yeah, I want to say that's 3 minutes. So you can set the timeout directly on like command, on like the cy.get command itself. But just for like the overall, like all the tests I execute, that default command timeout, I just have it set for the 30 seconds. Let me jump back to it. Response timeout, that's just if I have a command that's sending an HTTP request. I don't do that too often, but there are some cases where it's just a shortcut. And I can go into those sorts of commands a bit later. But just kind of know, like, I have that set for, oh no, actually this is 3 minutes. I think the other command was 4 minutes. But yeah, just I have this set for 3 minutes in this case. And then the viewport width and height. This is totally configurable. This is actually the resolution that's set when I run any of these tests. So if I go back to this login test, that's the resolution of this whole window here on the right-hand side. And yeah, and I guess the reason I have that set for 1920 by 1200 is I think it's just a pretty standard resolution that a lot of people are going to be working with, and it also affects what sorts of elements are visible on the page. And I think this resolution is a pretty good resolution to be able to see everything that should appear. So again, it just makes writing tests a lot easier if, if we're not having to deal with weird resolutions. So it's just a good standard. I guess I'll go into different sorts of commands now. So cy.visit just goes to whatever URL that you specify in it. Again, you can use the slash and that will just indicate the base URL, or you can type in whatever you want in it and it will go to that page. I have so cy.login, that's actually a custom command that I made. There's a file within Cypress that's called commands.js, and you can actually specify different Cypress commands that you want to add to it. And the reason for this is actually something I've been working on recently, just trying to, because originally what I was doing before, there were different functions that were isolated to different tests. But now I'm trying to migrate them all into this one commands file. So that way it's a lot easier to pull different like reusable commands within Informer and then also be able to like configure them in one place if like a dev changes something within the UI, and then like instead of having to go to individual files and update like these different elements that they're hitting, like for example this one, instead of having to update like, oh, like we're not using input name like username anymore, like okay, well I can just go in here and change it, and then any files that are using this will get updated. So yeah, just keep in mind that commands.js, we can write custom Cypress commands here. Is that all? That's all it's used here. I guess keep in mind within cy.get you can also have assertions. So for this one, for example, we have it's getting this element, the toast, and then flex, and then it should, and then you can have different like assertions within this should command. So in this case, I have it should have text, and then unable to log in. And this can also be like instead of have text, it could be have value, and then if there's like a specific like number that's supposed to contain, then it can be that. It's not stored within the text of the HTML like element itself. There's also a .click command. So like actually, do I use that? Good. Yeah, so here we go. So it goes back to that contains login and then .click. So that's for any like button element, it'll just click that button. So pretty straightforward there. Where that contains .type. .type. So it's kind of like, actually, let me jump back. I guess I can show you kind of like the different types that happen. I know we use what. I can show you side by side. So you'll see here, at least for this username element, you can see that this is how you can indicate that it's like an input type. And that's how you know that like in Cypress, a command like .type would work with it. And same sort of case for this login button here. You can see that it's like button type. So that's in a case where like a .click command would work with it. There's also a .clear command, which actually I have that.
Yeah, I was seeing that.
I use that. Yeah, so it does what it says. It just clears any sort of text that would be in the input box. I typically put that right before I use .type, just so that way I know that what I'm typing in is what it should be. It also helps a bit with like I know I've seen like some weird things before where if an element isn't fully loaded, sometimes it will type like everything, like all the text I have in here. So I just put this clear command. So it buys it a bit more time as well, but also like, again, clears out to make sure there isn't anything that shouldn't be there. Those are the pretty, at least like kind of like .visit, .get, .click, .should. Those are all kind of like the most common commands that I use. I guess another thing to keep in mind with Cypress is that there is also a way that you can run them with called Headless. So that's like if you want to run a test, but don't want like, or don't rather need this whole like UI to show up, you can use, you can use a command like, and I'll kind of outline which are each of these different parts do in a second. This would be. And so -spec, just identifying which file or files I want to run. -b for the browser, in this case I specified Chrome, and then -f headless, so now it's running in headless mode. And so you'll see here, running through all these tests without showing the UI. All them passing, and that says they passed. One also really nice thing about Cypress is I'll actually save a video of this test execution. So it'll be under Cypress videos, and then oh, I think there's a problem with my computer actually. It's like it has the whole video, but like it'll jump to the end for some reason. But yeah, it does save a recording of it. It's just kind of wonky right now. I think I've been changing some settings too, so that's probably why. Why it's weird. But that's another option as well within Cypress that it will save the recording. It also saves screenshots as well. If there's a test that fails, it'll save a screenshot on the specific page and kind of like what element it was looking for when it failed. So that's another nice tool. I think it appears. I'll open that again. Oh, here we go. Yeah, there's like a screenshot, and then if there are any failures, they would appear here. I think that, well, I guess I know I'm gonna go through kind of like the structure, I guess, for writing a test. I think that's really like the only other thing I can think of. Pretty much covered kind of like the bulk of everything else. But since Cypress is built on the Mocha framework, it's going to use the same Mocha syntax. And basically what that means is it uses the same sort of hooks, like it'll start with a describe, and then each test will execute in like its own if function. There are before each, after each hooks that you can use to kind of dictate how the test should execute. So just a quick example of that. So I'll start with like describe. I'll call this test example. Let's do 4. We'll do make this easy for myself. Okay, so save that. Cypress. Okay, cool. So basically, so the cy.log command, it literally just puts text within like the Cypress runner itself. So if you want to put like a note or something there, I never use it, but it's only useful in this one case I've had to use it. But so what you'll see here is these different hooks. Let me see if I can flip the screen again. So you'll see that before will always only execute once at the beginning of like this describe function. Before each will always execute after each it, like each it function. So if actually I can I'll demonstrate that in a second. But then after each, same sort of thing. After the it function executes, then after each will execute, and then after will always execute last. So if I do, we'll do one. Let me see if I can that. Yeah, so what you'll see here is so this before executes within this first test. Have the before each, the body, and then after each. And now since the first before already executed before, we have the before each again, same test body after each, and then we have the after all since it was the last one. Also, I guess one thing to note, I don't think the order of these actually matters within like the describe. Like if I do this, yeah, it doesn't change anything. So you can, I just have them arranged that way because it's just easier to keep track of what's doing what. You can arrange them however you want. And one thing to note as well, it's also really like handy about Cypress is that if you are editing a file, like let's say like we are right now with this test, let's say you make an edit here and then save it, then it'll automatically re-execute the test if you have like the like browser open running that test. So that's just another handy thing about Cypress. Oh, here we go. Okay. So what you'll see here is it's actually seeing 10 elements, like I guess children within this side nav tab element itself. Let's say you have, so I guess the example I'm trying to say is like, let's say sometimes you'll have cases where you'll have these different elements that are contained within, like in this case, it's the class side nav tabs. You cannot specify multiple elements at once, if that makes sense. So let's say like, it's seeing that there are 10 of these like buttons here that I use with side nav tabs, and I want to use .click on it. That will not work. You have to specify one specific element at a time. So like in this case, side nav tabs, first child, and that's what Cypress is just recommending, but you can do a whole bunch of different things with it. Actually, so you can see here, so this is like, if I use this playground selector, I wouldn't say like this playground selector is like whatever it recommends is like the greatest thing in the world. It's definitely really helpful, and it can be like, its recommendations can be pretty spot on sometimes. But like in this case, like if I'm using the playground selector here, let me get rid of that. If I hover over like this button here, let me do some things. So let's say I want to, like this button specifically I want to hit. So if I hit that, this is what it recommends. The thing that I don't like about this is when you have like nth child 2, sometimes this can be volatile, I guess is the word I'd use. Sometimes, like normally this wouldn't change, but using like nth child 2 is kind of subject to whatever like loads on the page. So it's not specifying like this element specifically, it's just like specifying the second element like loaded from like the body tree on the page. So instead of using this, sometimes I'll just like go to inspect the page, split it back up. And if I use like Chrome's element selector tool, let me get rid of that first. So I'll hover over that. And if I kind of like look more closely at the element itself from Chrome, I can see here that there's an ARIA label for pivot. And when I click on that, that takes you to the pivot page in Informer. So I know that this is specific to this button. So then I can just go back. And so like, okay, great. Now I know like there's a, like this ARIA label element here that I know will probably help me out. Let me go back into the Cypress and make sure that it works. So then I can go in here, put in ARIA label, tools, pivot. And now I know like it's highlighting which one it sees and that there's only one of them. So I know, okay, great, I can use this. That's kind of, so that's just kind of like giving you an insight into like my sort of like thought process or workflow when I'm kind of like writing a test. As I'm stepping through like the different parts of Informer that I want the test to go through, it's just these things I think about like when I'm trying to like figure out what these different elements I'm going to use for Cypress to get and navigate through. And like it's just you'll just kind of like learn as you're writing tests that when you see certain things like that nth child, sometimes it can be good if it's nested kind of deep within like a specific tree. But if it's like the first thing, I usually don't like using it. I prefer to use sort of like these different sorts of elements like the ARIA label. I'm not seeing it right now, but there is another one that's called ng model, which I also use a lot. But just one of those things as you play around with it more, you'll kind of understand and get an idea of. So in Cypress, there are different like default folders that they have, which have like specific purposes. Like there's a support folder which houses like commands.js, which is like if you want to have like custom like Cypress commands. Index.js. I don't know what that does. I don't use it, but the thing to point out though is that there's also this fixtures folder. The workflow that Cypress typically indicates that you want to put in fixtures or like any sort of files that you're using for tests, or any sort of like files that you want to use like as a for configuring other tests. So for example, here I have these backup files that I made, and they have specific purposes. Like I tried to name them the best I could, just kind of indicate what they do. So like clean backup just wipes everything. This criteria backup loads specific criteria. I guess like data sets that have specific criteria on them that I use for tests. Data sources just loads all the data source types. Jobs. Jobs. I remember that sets up like a specific data source for one type of job that runs in that test. And then Northwind just loads up just a data set or a data source with Northwind and then a data set with Northwind orders, which is kind of like the default data set that we use. One thing to keep in mind about these tests and these backups is that you're going to want to run them locally, like with a local Informer instance instead of using like testing 3000 or testing 4000. And the reason for that is these backup files are going to completely wipe whatever is already configured on testing 3000 or testing 4000 if you ran the test there, or ran a test that used these backup files. So that's just something really important actually to keep in mind. Like once you get into like cloning the i5 Cypress repo and then starting to like run some of these tests, is that you definitely don't want to run these on testing 3000 or testing 4000.
Don't run backups on testing 3000, 4000. That's the
like the login test is no problem on testing 3000 or testing 4000, but if you get into basically like any other tests that actually I can show you, like this one for example. So the tests are always going to start out with this. Well, before it was I think it's like ADU or like AU.system restore. Basically, if you see system restore in here, don't use that on. Okay. Don't use that on testing 3000 or testing 4000. That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
See if there's anything else worth mentioning, just from like these default folders I have set up in Cypress. I guess just pointing out too, like there's some just like CSV file, JSON, Excel file that have like all of those Northwind orders that runs for, I think this test actually. No, for this data sets test. Oops. Any other default files that work? Oh, I was going to mention this and I didn't. So the previous QA made a folder called Web Services. I don't know if this one comes default with Cypress or not. I can't remember. But these have functions in them which send HTTP requests directly to Informer. So one useful one is this au.login. If I go to that. So what you'll see that it does here is it sends like this command to cy.request. So that means it's just sending an HTTP request. Specifically, it's a post request to this route. It wraps this basically just key and value JSON essentially. This gets a bit more complicated. I wouldn't want to dive too deep into this right now. I think with Cypress, just getting your handle on like cy.get, like cy.click, or excuse me, like a dot click on like chained onto cy.get, dot type, dot contains, just kind of like getting a handle on those first, and then digging a bit deeper into this. Because this is kind of like, it starts getting a bit more complicated with like, I guess like, I don't know if you remember when I mentioned like you worked with like Postman before.
Postman?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, there's a, here I can show you that. So I can give an example here. Hopefully it'll work. Take this route. Oh, that's not what I want. Oh. It would be, there we go. Cool. Okay. So this is another reason, I guess, like once you start digging a bit more into like how the requests work, this is the route that is used in Informer to send like a login essentially, like this like username and password. Mm-hmm. And that's what Cypress is using. So it's just a shortcut instead of having to go through like login page, type in the username, type in the password, click login, and then go in. You can just send this route and then it'll take you to, and then you'll be logged in. And that's where like you'll see here, expect response status equal 200. So back here, I got a response of 200, okay. Just in general, I think it's a really good reference. I know that like, I think it starts out with like getting started and all these sort of like just the core concepts. I think spending some time and just kind of reading through these would be really big. Mm-hmm. Because I know that's what I did. That's what I was doing when I first played around with it, and like it'll definitely go over a lot of things I already went over here. But I think it'll probably explain it probably a bit better than I can do off the top of my head. But
Sure.
no, I think just starting out, focusing on like getting started and then the core concepts. I know that Cypress has this dashboard here, which is kind of nice. I think there's a free version and then there's a paid version. But I don't touch on I don't use that. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of things that are probably a bit much for right now. But yeah, just getting started. I think the core concepts right now would be really good for you to focus on.